Oh, it's Friday, 8:30. It's episode 151. It's Chocy Chat. It's 11th of October. Can you imagine? Let me just see who's about. Bum bum not Greton. How are you? I'm going to apologise for my croaky voice. I've been a poorly boy. Still am a poorly boy, actually. I'm not going to lie. About half an hour ago, it was. Am I going to be able to do Chocy Chat or not? I don't know, but I'm here. I'm here. Hello, Chocy Chat. How is everybody? I'm going to send some waves out. How's everybody doing? Happy Chocy Chat Friday, everybody. I can see Evelyn there. Mystic Chocolates. Hello, hello. How is everybody? Chocolate. Nana, how are you? Ruth in Utah. I'm really good, actually. Ruth, really, really well. A bit poorly this week. There's a really nasty kind of virus going away. We were like the whole household went down. So like we were good. We were good at the weekend, and then like everybody in order got ill, and then I did Wednesday, and it's just been downhill since then. So not nice at all. So there's always nasty bugs going about, aren't there? What a horrible virus. Hot, cold, hot, cold. Now I sound like I've got a raspy throat. So Sabil down in Dubai, how are you? I'm really good, thank you. Hashem walaikum salam, my friend. Ronnie had a birthday this week. How are you doing, Ronnie? Who else going? Accidentally booked into WA talks one day after each, but came out well. Happy days. They're good things to do. You know, I would say go and find your audience. Actually, wish you'd if you get a chance to go and talk about what it is that you do, it's always a good thing, because it's just you've got to go and find your customers. You've got to go and find your audience, and doing talks, doing markets, doing all that kind of thing is just one of the perfect ways of doing it. I think the thing about being a chocolatier, and this will resonate with lots of people, there are so many jobs, but nobody really knows anybody that's a chocolatier. So when you say I'm a chocolatier, suddenly everybody's like, oh, really? Tell me all about it, right? So it's such an easy entry kind of conversation. And it gives you a chance to kind of express your passion for what it is that you do. And it's a good way to find your audience, right? So do talks, do Women's Institute, whether it's schools, whether it's, it doesn't really matter. If there's 10 people there, 30 people there, or 300 people there, you will still connect with somebody from the audience who would like to try or buy what you're doing. So, Linda in Jordan, it's been a long time. I've been both so busy with life. Yeah, me too. Absolutely non-stop for me. Absolutely non-stop. Lots of yacht chefs at the minute. Lots of private mega yacht chefs at the minute. All our hands-on classes. So I'm slowly catching up, and I've got a few classes to actually try and schedule next week if I can. If I've still got a voice, we'll see. So Linda there is back. Are you back in the USA? She's shelling tonight. Hudson's Chocolates. Hello, hello. Isle Bakes. Good evening from the Isle of Wight. Who else we got? La Griffin, Greece. Hello. Levoco Chocolates. That's Laura down in Weymouth. Mrs. So Sassy's there. She's poorly as well. La Goose Noir. How are you? I'm good. Nadia, how are you? Susie Floozy, how are you? How's the arm and wrist, Susie? I hope you're on the mend properly. Ash Pastry Arts, hello. Temper. I can see lots of everybody tonight. So, good evening, Chocy Chat. How's everything going? Busy. It's that time of year. I'll tell you what I wanted to do. I wanted to talk about temperature tonight. We'll talk about temperature, and there's two things that happen at certain times of the year, and it's that area where we get a little bit warmer and people struggle, and then also like northern hemisphere where it gets a little bit cooler and people start having the opposite problems. So I'm going to talk about temperature tonight, and just get before we get too excited and too ramped up with volume and Halloween and then Christmas. Just a couple of things to think about when you're producing chocolates, particularly in the northern hemisphere, where it's, daytime temperatures at the moment for us kind of 12, 13 degrees, depending where you are, and it's a little bit cold. So we'll go through that in a little bit. So, gosh, you've got people Temper in Canada. Paula's there, Fusion Chocolates. Mother Baker there, Northern Ireland. How are you? As an amateur, I don't know if I've entered the right chat. Baked at 311, you were in the right chat. So if you have questions, fire away. If I know the answer, I will answer. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know, but I might be able to find out for you. I've not been stumped many times. Forest Road Chocolates, hello, another one in Canada. Well, no, British Columbia, aren't you? Canada. Who else have we got? Chocolate Creams, hello, my friend. Alice, who's only up the road. Jason in the Napa Valley, and we've got, who else have we got? Mariba down in New Zealand, because people are all over the place tonight, aren't there? So, right, let's just have a chat. Let's just have a scroll through. Let's just have a chat about temperature. So what happens? I get these So Sassy chocolate, right, with a 6th emergency service. We'll do this, this is from a class the other day. We were showing all the different techniques and what you can do and how you can do it. So it's not about that mold. What happens is, as we get to kind of the end of Easter and we get into April and May, I'll talk about weather conditions where we are, and things just start warming up. And what happens is, when they shell, the chocolate's too warm and it stays too liquid and it's not drying. And they put the shells, or they put the molds in the fridge when the chocolate's wet, and it causes all sorts of problems. What happens as we get towards winter? So we're going through this kind of warm period, and then kind of September, mixed weather. So some days warm, some days cold. Evenings are cooling down, but it cools down quite rapidly. What happens is your molds are too cold. So let's take, for example, that we're using silk. So we would melt chocolate to 33. We'd add the silk to temper it. Give it a really good mix, get it to 32. When your room gets cold, these get cold, and if you pour chocolate into a mold that's too cold, you will end up with dull marks, okay? And what we're trying to do is just slow down that. We're trying to balance out that temperature a little bit more and just slow that down. The other thing that happens is the table that you're working on, particularly if you've got a cold surface, the table that you're working on is cold, so this mold is on a cold surface. And you get this this cold spot right in the center here. So when you pour your mold and you pour your shells and you tap everything out, because the room's cooler, and it's normally when your room kind of dips below 14 degrees, what happens is the chocolate sets very, very quickly. We don't want to force the shells to retract too quickly. We kind of need to buy it some time. And the time is to allow this area, this painted color, to melt. Once that color has melted, or once that color cocoa butter has melted, and we've tapped everything out, we're just trying to keep this at a balanced temperature. We don't want this to chill too quickly. I think it's really, really important. I come across this all the time, particularly with tablets and bar molds. If that's on a cold surface and you pour chocolate, if you imagine pouring chocolate onto a cold surface, instead of it running nicely, what it does is it skids and stutters, and that's what causes it to look dull. And we want to kind of slow that down. One option is to give the mold a warm. You can give the mold a warm. It's not something I teach, and it's not something it's not something I'm a fan of, simply because warming the mold, what temperature is warm? Warm is not a temperature. Warm is a kind of, and we don't do that, do we? We don't, like, it's exact. We do correct temperatures. We don't do, like, we were weighing something, we don't say it's about 40 grams. It's either 40 grams or it isn't. I like temperature. If that mold dips below kind of 14 degrees, which is quite possible if it's on a cold surface, when you pour chocolate in at 32, it sets too quickly. And then when you tap it out, because the mold's colder, you end up with really, really thicker shells, or worse, the edges are too instead of them being nice and sharp, they end up too rounded, or they end up like completely square. If your room is cold and you're a home producer, work on a couple of mats. If you need to, just stack a couple of mats up. If you really need to, shell on top of a cloth, so that you've just got a little bit of a barrier between you. I always see this problem with Easter as well, Easter eggs, because we're pouring into a cold surface, because it's a wider surface, it cools down faster, or there's no heat that's left in it. Just have a barrier between you and a cold surface. Particularly, I mean, I've got a granite table here, so it is quite cold. It will be room temperature. Metal tables will be a little bit cooler as well, because they keep no heat. And if you put these on a metal table, you will end up with like this bullseye of very, very cold. Where you pour the chocolate in and you tap them out, you'll see that the chocolate, the edges are lovely and shiny, and the very, very cap of it's dull because the mold was too cold. And I come across that a lot. I get sent a lot of pictures, and it's like, what happened with my chocolate? And it's like, you poured it in a mold that was too cold. But I'll say again, what I don't like doing, and I've seen this so many times, and I had this discussion with somebody on Tuesday on a hands-on class. they said they were told to warm the mould. So we did one mould. We warmed what, and I said, all right, warm what you think is half the mould. Warm what you think is warm. And she. It was a guess. She warmed it, and then we shelled, and then we turned them out. The side that she'd warmed was all dull. So what she's done is, I think, taken the cocoa butter out of temper or over melted the cocoa butter. Warm's not a temperature, so warming the mould is not something I'm a huge fan of. I think that you work in the room temperature that you've got, and then you need to slow down. Once we've got the chocolate in and we've tapped everything out and given it a good scrape, you want to kind of, again, if you're going to put that on its edge on a cold surface, it's going to cool down too quickly. If my room temperature is kind of 20, 21, which is what I like to work at, we will leave that upside down for about 2 minutes and then turn it on its side for about 8 to 10 minutes. It's more than enough. And I'm waiting for the chocolate to go dull. Once it's had 10 minutes, then we'll put it in the fridge and then just force it to retract, and that kind of works for me. If I crack that window open and it's 13 degrees outside, if I stand that up, I'll start seeing all of them retract. What I need to do is just slow down how quickly it turns dull. So how quickly it goes from a liquid, so wet looking chocolate, to a dull looking chocolate, which you kind of want to slow down that process. I think it's just one to watch. I think we also have quite a few, a month or two of not making chocolate, so we kind of get out of practice a little bit, and there's all these little key things that there's all these little details, there's all these little points that you need to measure, and like once you're on your journey and you're producing lots, you kind of get into the rhythm of it. But I think just watching the temperature, particularly if you've got a cold surface, causes no end of problems. And I see that if I go back historically at messages and I look at everything October, there's just loads and loads of messages in September, October of why is my chocolate was tempered, they retracted but they're dull, and very often it's just because the mould is too cold, right? Let me scroll back, there's a couple of questions. So if you've got questions, fire away and I'll try and get to you. Got people in mouth explosions, hello in Greece. Right, there's a question here, 1 second. Let's go back. I'm about to try making ganache with fresh grated wasabi. Any tips? I know wasabi loses flavour quickly when exposed to air, but I'm hoping the chocolate will protect it. Alex eats, yeah. With wasabi, to be honest, I'd much rather use a paste because it doesn't. The wasabi paste in the tubes doesn't oxidise. The wasabi that's in the fresh root, so. It's not a grater. It's like a wooden disc with kind of raised dimples on it, which we will kind of brush round, a bit like a barber's brush. And then we'll scrape that. I would put that straight into the cream. I'd warm the cream to about 40. If we go too high in temperature with the wasabi, we'll just kind of break all the acid that's in there, which is the heat. Warm the cream to about 40, 45, and then just let the wasabi, put it in a bowl, wrap it over, just let it infuse, and then strain it out. The texture of fresh wasabi is a bit like kind of parsnip or ginger. It's really, really fibrous. You want to strain that out. So we're going to infuse the cream. We're going to infuse the cream and then strain it and then warm it up and then make your ganache as you'd normally do. If I'm honest, fresh wasabi, it's just got a little bit too much water in it for me. So you don't want to put it directly into the chocolate because it will just seize the chocolate. The paste, if I'm honest, is a little bit better. It's a little bit more concentrated. And also there's some preservatives in there which will kind of help in the long run. So when making cold ganache, you bring the cream to the boil and then cool it, or just warm it to 40 and use. Warm it to 40 and use. We're just trying to lessen the shock. Not a huge fan of cold ganache. Like if you're, I mean, it's no point in making a cold ganache if you're only doing like less than a litre. It's not really worth the wait. But if you're doing bigger volumes, yeah, it's absolutely worth it. Just add that cream really, really slowly, and you will need an immersion blender or a stick blender to blend that in. But yeah, you only need to warm it to 40. What you don't want to use is cream straight from the fridge. It's just too cold, and it will seize the chocolate, and you'll end up with all these little grainy bits in there. So. Can you use a cold water bain-marie to cook caramels quicker? Do you mean a hot water? I think if you were making caramels, a bain-marie wouldn't get hot enough. Caramels need to go up to like 100 and, well, they need to go, so the dry caramel needs to go above 76. If you don't cook it above 76, it's sticky, or like it's too sticky. Also probably won't have enough cover. I don't know, Evelyn, don't quite understand that question. I don't know how you get the heat up on a bain-marie hot enough to, if you were warming caramels, you could, yeah. You just want to make sure you don't get any, you want to do it in a plastic bowl if you can, rather than a metal bowl, if you're warming it up over a bain-marie, but warming is warming, right? When using the yogurt powder to make a cheesecake layer, does it affect the shelf life? Can you use it with white chocolate caramel ganache instead of straight ganache? The thing I like about yogurt powder is there's no kind of biological activity in it, right? So it's a dry product. It's really, really strong. I'm not a big fan of using yogurt in ganache. I've certainly seen some recipes, and it does make me, I think the old school, it makes me go, not really sure. The thing I like about yogurt powder is you can add it directly to white chocolate, or you can add it directly to a ganache. But you can, because it's dried and powdered and very, very strong, you can add more and more powder and get a really, really strong yogurt flavour. Equally, if you just put some citric acid into some cream, you'll get the same yogurt flavour if you were going to make a ganache. So not malic acid, it wouldn't be strong enough, it'd just be a little bit too like eye-watery, but citric acid into cream will give you a yogurt type flavouring. It certainly tricks the brain. Yogurt powder, does it affect the shelf life? There's lots of things that would affect the shelf life. You know, if you put yogurt powder into, it's the actual ganache recipe, because you're adding a dry powder to it, so it's not going to affect it, but it's not going to lengthen it either. The ganache is the ganache, and then consider that the yogurt powder is the flavouring. So if it's a 6-week ganache recipe and you've got yogurt powder in it, it's still going to be 6 weeks. It's not going to extend it by any means at all. To call it, you can put, yeah, you can call it however you want. If you want to get, I've got a bowl here. I've got a bowl of shells here. Look. If you want to cool it quickly, you can pour it onto a table, and like we do tempering with, we can spread it round on a table and cool it down that way. Or yeah, put it in a bowl. The only thing I'd say about cooling is you just don't want condensation to go into it. We've made a product and got the water out of it. Why would you want to risk putting it near water? You can cover it, if you split it into 3 or 4 smaller bowls, wrap it with cling film and drop it in the fridge, you'll be absolutely fine. It'll cool down quickly. Yeah, you could put it over cold water. With conduction though, so we've got a really, you know, we've got a bowl of caramel that's at, like, say it's like at 120 degrees. If you put that into a bowl of cold water, it's cold water, that water's going to warm up really quickly with the transfers, so you're going to have to keep changing the water over. Cooling caramels, I'd split it in smaller amounts and get it into a fridge. The fridge will cope with that. So, Mother Baker saying, can I just say I hope any of our crew in Florida and the surrounds are safe and well. I did message Coco Lily, because I know that she was literally in the path, and she said they were all okay, and a couple of other chocolatiers that are in Florida said yeah we're okay, a little bit rubbish, not massively damaged, or certainly the words back to me were it wasn't as bad as kind of everybody was making out. However, I'm sure there are areas where it's absolutely destroyed, so definitely thinking about them all. I'm so scared to make ganache and poison someone if my shelf life is short. Am I paranoid? This is the challenge. This is the challenge with ganache, right? And I talk about this a lot. I know that I come across as being anti-ganache. I'm not. This is Chocy Chat crew, so we can be honest, okay? Ganache is really for the patisserie industry. So if we did 2 parts cream to 1, say dark chocolate, 2 parts cream to 1 part chocolate, we've made a preparation that's really high in water content, and it was the covering for cakes, or it's the filling for cakes, which generally kind of eaten within 2-3 days. Chocolatiers adapted it and changed it, and we add sugars. So if we did that 2 to 1, So, or yeah, 2 parts cream to 1 part chocolate. We're going to get really kind of good flavour. The chocolate's being diluted by 70% or 66%. If we want to extend that, we're going to need to add some additional sugars to bind up that water. The problem is as the shelf life goes up, the flavour of it goes down. I think this is where caramels are. You should be good friends with caramels, and I think is to try and get caramels to work for you. Nothing wrong with doing ganache, but like if you're making a selection, and say there's 4 or 5 pralines and ganduyas, and then you've got 4 or 5 caramels, the ganache in there could make the whole box have 6 weeks. Whereas if you took the ganache out, we got a box that's kind of good for 3 months, not a problem at all, and longer. I think anybody that's involved in food kind of gets a little bit paranoid about food safety, and are they safe and are they storable? I make on our boxes, we say that you need to consume them within 15 days. The fillings that I make go way past that. But here's the thing, I don't know how customers look after them. I don't know how they're storing them. There are shipping conditions. So I kind of want them to consume. I don't want them to store them for months, right? Like if they want to store chocolates for 3 months, just wait 3 months and then buy them then. That's my logic behind it. I don't think you should be paranoid. I think you should do the research on what's the ganache, what's the shelf life, and what are the binding properties, whether it's glucose, inverted sugar, sorbitol, galactose. I'm a huge fan of vegetable glycerin, and I talk to chocolate shells. We talk about this a lot. That years ago we used vegetable glycerin in a lot of things, and it is fantastic at binding up water. But glycerin became a little bit of a swear word because there were other types of glycerin that we use. And the glycerin is the word glycerine, and the public were kind of misled, and it's this nasty sin. Vegetable glycerin, I've got one down here. Vegetable glycerin that I buy is that one. It's Naissance. It's the 806 version. That is as good at binding up water as sorbitol, and it's tasteless. And I'm a big fan of that because we can take a 6-week kind of ganache and we can add 4 to 6% of glycerin and then extend it to 16 weeks, which is absolutely fantastic, depending on the chocolate, right? So generally that will be for a dark or a milk chocolate, not so much a white chocolate. Should you be scared? I don't think you should lose sleep over it, but I think that if you're making any food that for the public, you need to know that you are taking a risk, and that you should review the recipes you're using so that you can have a little bit of peace of mind, right? I think like the challenge with ganache is you don't want to go to bed at night going, oh, I hope my chocolate's all right. Equally, if you ran a restaurant, you don't want to feed loads of customers every night and say, oh, I hope everybody's okay in the morning. And it's that same process, right? Get a recipe that you know that works. There's some recipes on my page. The caramel ganache is absolutely fantastic. This one here. Has anybody been into it? The caramel ganache is on my page, and it's this one. And it's good for 120 days. And it looks like we scooped some out because I had to make some chocolates yesterday for family. We will do a half layer of that and do a hazelnut ganduya over the top of it. That caramel ganache, we can add orange zest, we can add lemon zest, we can add spices, we can warm it up, we can turn it into many different things or many different flavours, and not alter that, alter the shelf life integrity of it. I can add darker chocolate to that, and then rewarm it, add dark chocolate to it, and it literally looks like a dark chocolate ganache, only it is much safer. And the difference between, think about the recipe difference between a caramel and a ganache. Both contain cream, both contain sugar, both contain chocolate. The only difference is we've taken the sugar to such a high heat that it kind of makes it safer, and then when we deglaze it with the cream, we boil all the water off. So it kind of becomes like, the difference between a caramel and a ganache. terms of ingredient is not hugely different. In a ganache we will use liquid sugar, so glucose, inverted sugar, not even just cane sugar melted down into the cream, which is what we used to do years ago before we got all the fancy stuff. We would measure cream, just granulated sugar into cream, bring that to the boil, make sure everything's dissolved, and then blend that into melted chocolate so it emulsified, and that used to give us a really good. We'd add vegetable glycerine and have something that was good for kind of 6 to 8 weeks. Have a look at the recipes. I don't think you should be losing sleep over it, but you certainly don't want to go to bed at night worrying about whether your food's safe. That's not a nice feeling at all. Oh my, it always jumps forward and then I've got to go back all the way. 1 second. I don't know why it did that. Everybody's writing. And, here we go. 1 second. Give me a moment, I've got to scroll back. Yeah, Evelyn, I answered that one, I think. What's the best temperature to do velvet without having residues to the touch? It's not the right temperature. You want the bonbons frozen, okay? You want the bonbons frozen. So cover a plate with cling film. So like the ideal thing is a microwave plate. Is if you've got a cake turntable, that's a little bit better. Build yourself a cardboard box around it, because velvet is the biggest waste of cocoa butter in my opinion. Line the box with silicone paper if you can, and then what you want to do is freeze the bonbons till they're absolutely solid frozen. Warm the cocoa butter to, I use it at 35. If you warm it to 35, you're trying to lessen that impact. Bonbons come straight out the freezer, and then from a distance you'd spray. This is where you get all the wastage over. Then you want to lift them from the plate. Don't touch the bonbons, lift them in the plate, put them straight back into the fridge and just allow it to completely set. The trick is, if you just spray direct cocoa butter, you're going to get that on your fingers. What you want to do is half white chocolate, or 50% white chocolate and 50% cocoa butter colour, and use a 0.8 needle or a 1mm needle and spray it really at the highest pressure that you've got. If you've got 60 psi, which is strong, that will give you a good velvet effect. I think the trick is to let it dry, but if you just spray the pure cocoa butter, it's always going to come out on your fingers because you're putting a really heavy layer on. It's really important that product is really frozen if you want to do that velvet effect. It's nice. It's a nice effect and it's lovely to photograph. I think that the challenge is that when customers pick them up, their finger marks, if they've got warm fingers, it's all over the chocolate and you almost like destroy the design. So it's great for Instagram, it's great for videos, it's great for kind of adding a texture if you want to do a display. In terms of eatability, not my favourite. I know in the competition work, we see it all the time where they'll take a bonbon and they'll use an empty shell cut in half. I'll show you here. They'll cut a shell in half. We got a half one in here? No, we don't, do we? They'll cut a half one and then put that half shell over it, okay, and then spray, and then remove that half bit of shell, okay, and it will leave that. So we see that, but I can't honestly say it's my favourite. I think it's nice ways to decorate, but drying, leave them to dry. When you add the citric acid to the cream, is it the powdered acid or are you making a water solution? No, powdered. We're just hydrating it because citric acid's a salt, right? So it's in a granular form. If we put it into water, we would change the solution that you put into pâte de fruits is a different thing. So we do equal amounts of citric acid and water, dilute it in a bottle and keep it in the fridge, and then when we make pâte de fruits, we can tip in what we want to actively set the pectin at the end of the cooking process. The citric acid, I would just sprinkle it directly into the cream. As soon as you've got it all dissolved, go ahead and make your ganache. What we're doing is almost souring the cream. If you think of the flavour of yoghurt, it's kind of got the consistency of double cream. The it's not double cream. It's got the consistency of double cream, but it's acidic, or acidic sour. It's a little bit of a fake way of doing a yogurt flavouring. Just, you only need a pinch, right? You don't need lots. So the challenge with citric acid is it wallops straight up in terms of acidity, and it's there forever. If anybody's ever had pâte de fruits that's had a little bit too much citric acid on it, it destroys everything you eat afterwards, right? So just go careful with it. It's not my citric acid is not my favourite. Just made a yogurt powder ganache, and it's very tasty, also a bit grainy, but it definitely has the texture of cheesecake. Yes, exactly that. So the velvet effect is made by airbrushing cocoa butter on a frozen chocolate. Yes, but it's always better if you do, 50-50 white chocolate to the coloured cocoa butter, or you do, if you can get it like the green one, we would do 30% milk chocolate, 30% white chocolate, 30% cocoa butter, and then 30% of the colour. But it does make decorating very, very expensive for what I think is not a great look. Right, it's great for Instagram, it's great, but in terms of eatability, a little bit too strong for me. I tried a small amount of citric acid directly into a white chocolate ganache, and it was perfect. Not sure if that's the right way to do it. Yeah, you can treat it like a seasoning, like you would salt. Okay, so malic acid, citric acid. If you buy citric acid and it's quite grainy, if you get yourself a clean coffee grinder, you can just turn it into a very, very fine powder, and then just put it back into the jar, because it does come out a little bit grainy. All right, it's the way it's manufactured. They pour it down through a curtain and blow as a liquid, and then blow carbon dioxide on it, and it forms these little pellets. Like if you sprinkle it into things and you don't blend it, if you bite a piece of citric acid, you will know about it. It's like swallowing a capful of vinegar. And it isn't pleasant, but yeah, if you've got a clean, sometimes you can do. I've got a stick blender here. If you've got a stick blender that's got the cup attachment, so when it's up, so you've got a stick blender and the blade. Sometimes the little shroud that covers it, you can turn it upside down, put the powder in that cup, cover it with cling film, and turn it on so it's like a little mini grinder. That would be enough. Just be very, very careful when you do that. Better to have a long shelf life for Christmas. Yes, it is. XO chocolates. Robert, how are you? Need to catch up with you, mate. Shelf life testing, yeah, this is a thing, and I don't think enough people do it. And how does it work? If I want, and it takes time, right? To determine the full shelf life, we would make a product, and then if I think it's okay for about 4 weeks, what we would do is maybe, and I wanted to go up to 12 weeks, I would use 8 bonbons. So week 1, 2, 3, and 4, I'm not going to test anything. So we'd put them in a box on a sheet of paper, and label each, write in what each one is. And then the first one, we don't need to check week 1, 2, 3, and 4, because we assume that it's okay. We want to cut one open. The 5th week, we want to cut it open and have a look, do a visual, have a smell, cut it into a quarter, maybe taste a piece. If it's all good, throw that away. It's a tick for week 5. And we do the same thing the following week. And we want to store them at room temperature. So if you're doing shelf life testing, you don't want to test them, you don't want to put them in the fridge, because that's slowing down any bacterial growth. We want to look at week 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and much, much further. And what you would do while you're waiting for that to happen, if we had that mix in there, if we know all the other ones are good, at this point, the minimum for your box of chocolates that's got that ganache in it, the minimum is 5 weeks, okay? If we test it on the 6th week and it's still good, now your label tells you they're 6 weeks. Does that make sense? So it's good. If you've got a bonbon, if you've got a ganache that you're not sure about, and there are some on the internet where it says it will last X amount, and you look at it and think, I don't know. Alternatively, you can just make some and put it in a tub, cling film it over, and leave it on the side with a label on the side of it just saying when it was made, and then just put an alarm or a reminder on your phone to check it every week, and you're waiting to see where it spores. I think one of the fascinating things is if we make really good shells and we do really good caps that aren't too thin, that's a level of preserving as well. So that might add an extra, it could actually add another extra 2 weeks to a shelf life. Dark chocolate is much more porous than milk and white chocolate. So dark chocolate, milk chocolate and white chocolate is even better at preserving. The milk content in there leaves the chocolate much more closed, so there aren't the air gaps. So dark chocolate's the most porous microscopically, so we get fat migration through dark chocolate. If we're doing a ganduja, which is like 70% nut paste to 30% chocolate, which is lovely and soft and really highly flavoured, but the fat migration, once we get kind of below 20 degrees, is chronic, right? You can go and look at them a week later and they're dull completely. On dark chocolate, but you do that with milk chocolate and it's much more, I mean, it's much longer shelf life to it, right? So, please can you show the glycerin again? Sorry, I was across the room listening, didn't see it in time. It is called Naissance. I get this from, there's a health food shop on the high street, and I get it from there. It's vegetable glycerin, and it's an organic one, which I quite like. But it's vegetable. It's called Naissance 80, and I quite like that. It's 806. Naissance 806. I quite like that one because it's got no taste to it. As I said, you know, used in the cake industry for very many people doing icing, doing flowers and all those kinds as a kind of anti-caking agent, and it will keep things soft. But what it does do is it will bind up water really effectively, because it meshes, right? So, and captures all the water, and it's got a similar, once it's bound into something, it's got a similar netting approach to gelatine in terms of these coils, right? So it got given a bad word. Glycerin got given a bad rep because it was in everything. But, you know, oddly enough, over the years, eggs were bad for you and now they're not. And then, red wine was bad for you and then it wasn't. And then sugar was bad for you and then it wasn't. Then butter was bad for you and then it wasn't. And glycerin was bad for you and then it wasn't. So I think you have to make your own, if you go to page 1 of Google, you'll get one answer. If you go to page 50, you'll get a different answer, right? So I think you just have to do the research and understand it. I know that vegetable glycerine is very good at binding up water, and it's something that we do use. Not a huge fan of inverted sugar, just because it's too sweet, and I don't like fillings that are ultra sweet. I like to find a balance of, so I kind of believe that chocolate is more savoury than it is sweet, right? With the exception of white chocolate, which is overly sweet. But they sweeten it so much because it's good at bulking up chocolate. If we have a dark chocolate, why would we put a really sweet filling in it? Actually, what we want to do is keep it more savoury. Certainly for adults, we kind of quite like bitterness and less sugar. So glycerin's a good answer. Inverted sugar, just too, you ever taste some inverted sugar, you're like, oh, I'm never eating that again. You're bouncing off the walls within a minute. James, how to substitute glucose and inverted sugar for people with diabetes? One option is sorbitol, which is polyol sugar. It's kind of 80% less sweet than sugar. There's galactose. There's lots of brands of polyol sugars, so alkali sugars, mostly used in the diabetic industry. There is a very good one called isomalt. Isomalt has the same properties as sugar. You've ever seen people do like chefs doing the pulled sugar? Years ago, we would boil a sugar syrup up and add tartaric acid, and then we had to use it when it was like 160 degrees, which is why none of us have got any feeling in our fingers anymore. And then isomalt came along, which we can melt at 60 degrees, which is tolerable on the hands, and then start stretching and making all these things. But that's a really good substitute for sugar. I think with diabetes, it might not necessarily just be the sugar as well. I think it's important to note that fats affect, so the amount of fats also affect the insulin for diabetics, certainly type 1. So it's not just the sugar, it's that very often they're going to want dark chocolate, which is lower fat, or doesn't have the milk solids in it. and then less sugar. I'd go with Ganduja, to be honest, rather than you know, you can make a dark shell, you can make a hazelnut or, you know, peanut paste, and then bind in dark chocolate, and you have something that's literally not sweet at all, right? So, hello, sir. Good evening. Can I freeze a ganache for 1 month and reuse it 1 month later? Does freezing affect the flavours? No, not huge. Well, it depends how much you protect it. If you you want to put it in airtight, if you can put it in a tub with a seal, and then also put it in a Ziploc bag or with maybe some silica gel. It will just stop any ice crystals building up. And then when the ganache comes out, you want to warm it thoroughly, kind of 45 or above, and give it a good stick blend. But you can freeze ganaches, not a problem. So if you've got excess left over, what you can't do is just keep going in and out, in and out. You can make them and then rewarm them once. What you don't want to do is keep rewarming them over and over and over, because we've got kind of bacterial growth. Freezing doesn't kill bacteria, it just stops it from multiplying. So the constant danger zone of warming up to 40-45, where bacteria is really active, is kind of something that we want to avoid. Alternatively, if we cook that ganache, if we rewarmed that ganache above 68, we go outside of that safe zone. 75 would be good, or 70 would be good. But there's a danger that you're just going to dehydrate any water that's left in there, and then when you cool it back down again, it's not going to be the same consistency. So the more you warm it, well, certainly once you get above 52, you'll get water evaporation. So you kind of got to be careful. But you can freeze it and you can rewarm it. When you freeze it, just protect it from additional odours and then from excess water crystal build-up, right? So caramel ganache on your page is amazing and so versatile. Thank you, Judith. The recipes that are on my page are the ones that I use. That's the caramel ganache, right? It's caramel with chocolate added. We're putting chocolate into caramel. There is nothing to go wrong. There is nowhere for it to go wrong. I don't use butter. Again, I had this conversation on Tuesday and on Wednesday with two different students. If I add butter into a caramel, it's because I want to make a butter caramel, but the problem is I'm putting a water into a product that I've tried to get the water out of. And honestly, I think chocolate tastes nicer than butter. So you might as well just get more chocolate in your chocolates, right? Excuse me. Poorly boy. You want to get more chocolate in your chocolates, right? That's the aim. I'm on the warm Ribena tonight. I made you caramel with gold chocolate and it was amazing. I could have sat with it with a bowl and a spoon. Yeah, that's happened here. I won't show you one of the bowls in there because somebody sat with a bowl and a spoon, right? Hi James, how would I make a spicy Mexican chocolate ganache with dark chocolate? I would steep some chilies, seeds and all. Green or red, doesn't matter, probably red are better. I would, or even if it's the chili flakes, I would let them infuse in the cream, strain them out and then make your ganache and go from there. If you wanted to generate a little bit more heat, you could put some chili flakes into the ganache and blend them in, or use a little bit of cayenne pepper, which will give you, you're not going to add lots to it, but it will give you a good like pepper like casein pepper, right? So it's going to give you a real kind of chili hit to it. Cayenne pepper's probably better rather than chili flakes. Certainly be easier to blend in, but yeah, infuse the cream. If you want to get those flavours into chocolate, infuse the cream, right? So bring it to the boil. This thing of like bring it to 41.2 degrees and face north. Warm it so that the product that goes in there can hydrate. So if it's a spice, if we put it in cold, the fat's going to circle it or envelope it all. The reason we would warm the cream up is to hydrate the product that we're putting in there to infuse. And things infuse better when they're warmer, right? So let it infuse, strain it if you need to, and then blend, bring it back, measure it again, bring it back to the boil, make your ganache, right? Can I paint with coloured cocoa butter on one day and then airbrush the next day or a few days later? Yeah, you can. You know, if you temper the cocoa butter when you airbrush, when it's in the mould, it's as tempered in there as it is in there. It's tempered again. It's fully bound with beta crystals. It's not uncommon for me to like paint on a Saturday, Sunday, and then on Monday maybe back them, and maybe on Friday or Saturday the following week we'll shell. It depends on what we're doing. I've got a lot of bonbons to do Thursday. I will probably spray them on Monday. Might do them Sunday night, but we've got I think 90 moulds to do on Sunday to paint. But I know I'm not going to shell those until Thursday or Friday. But it's not going to happen. So yeah, of course you can. Don't have to do it all in one day, but you can break it up, right? Luke's joined us. How you doing, Luke? I've got a few people join us here. Got messages everywhere in a minute. So I am just Michelle O'Hayon, MD. I think I've spoken to you before. As Jason's just said there, the crew is always happy to help. Go onto the Facebook page. If you've got questions, fire them in. What I've always said with the Facebook page is I just kind of wanted it to be an area where people share information, good information. If you know the answer, and it's not a mythical weird thing that you heard from somebody else that heard from somebody else that heard from somebody else, but if you're actively making chocolates and it's a tip or a trick or a little bit of advice, actually fire ahead, go ahead, answer on the Chocy Chat. I can only answer so much here at night, but certainly the chocolate chat page, Chocy Chat on Facebook, there's 1,500 members. People are adding stuff all the time, and there's so much really, really good information on there. I do read through. If I disagree with something, which I do occasionally, I will try and correct it nicely. The only thing that I ask on there is that you are ultra positive, and that you're helpful, because that's what it was always about. I don't like the mythical, you have to face north with yellow trousers and a blue dog, right? That's not. Talking of that, did everybody see the red sky last night? We were sat outside last night, and I kind of looked up and went, why is the sky bright red? And I can't normally see red. Red's one of the few colours, I can't see red and brown or yellow and pink. And I kind of looked up and it's like, that looks like it's red. How bizarre is that? So I can't see I can't see the reds in these very well. But the sky was just really obvious. Very strange. That really threw me, that. Because I stood outside going, that's what red looks like. I didn't have my glasses on either, right? I know you love the silk machine, but I'm wondering if a sous vide for a small producer. It's such a tough question, that one. I think everybody starts off as a small producer. I think to give yourself some kind of future proof, what I'd say about Easy Temper, if I was going to start again from the beginning, that would be one of my first purchases, the Easy Temper, simply because I use it to temper cocoa butters, I use it to temper the chocolate, and I also use it to temper fillings. If I make caramel, one of the reasons I don't put butter in caramel is there's nothing to temper. If I've got chocolate in caramel, I can now warm it to 33, blend in silk, and I can get a caramel to firm up just a little bit faster so that we can cap within 30-40 minutes rather than waiting 3, 4, 5 hours, right? Sous vide is good to make the silk block. So you make silk, and then you set it into blocks and grate it, so you'd be using it like Mycryo. I also put cocoa butters in here. So in the Easy Temper, let me lift it over. I put cocoa butters in there, so we've always got a red and we've always got a white and a black in there of a big bottle. I've got little baby sample bottles, so I will have some of the colours that when I'm teaching, it gives me some variety. Not uncommon for me to just put I'm going to need 5 large red bottles. No, I need 6 large red bottles on Sunday. So I'll probably put the 6 or 7 large big bottles in there just so that they soften. Because once they've softened, if I put them in the microwave for 30 seconds, they're all liquid. And so that's what I like about that machine. It's not just that I use it for tempering chocolate. We temper the cocoa butters. I still do small amounts over water. We've got a video coming out onto YouTube with that shortly on like how to, once that coincides with the website launching when we get to it. But I use that for more than just tempering chocolate. We'll use it for tempering cocoa butters. We'll use it for tempering fillings. Mycryo is very, very good. It does exactly the same thing. It just needs a bit more energy and a bit more warmth to melt those, and it depends how small you grate it. If you're grating in massive chunks into your chocolate, it's going to take much longer to melt in, and you're going to need to use a stick blender just to make sure everything is fully melted in and beet crystals are spread. The difficulty of using the stick blender is it generates heat. So if I leave the stick blender in the chocolate for a minute or so, and it's a big amount, it'll take the chocolate up 1 or 2 degrees because of friction. So it's not cheap, but there's lots of people that would vouch here. For those that have easy temper, when we say it's a game changer, it's a game changer. It really is. I can add it to 100 grams of chocolate or 50 grams of cocoa butter, or I can add it to 3 kilos of filling to get it to set faster. We do with the pralines and gandullas. We will blend that. I made some last night for my sister. We melted the chocolate, we melted the nut paste, we put it in, we added 2% of silk, blended it in really quickly, piping bag, laid it flat. As soon as that hit 28, we piped it. 10 minutes later, we were capping. And none of that did it need to go into the fridge. If we temper gandullas and pralines with the silk, it's just faster to do. I could do the same thing with sous vide. It would be hard for me to decide. If I was starting again, I would buy that. And I know it's not cheap, but I think if you're serious and it gives you some future proof, the sous vide will make one thing. That constantly it's on. It only takes 5 watts of power, so it's on full time, all time, doesn't it? I haven't turned that off in 2 years. So, or have I? No, I haven't turned it off. I've accidentally turned it off, but I've never meaningfully turned it off. Anybody that's got one, you'll know what I mean when I said I've accidentally. So, how long can you keep moulded shells if kept cool and low humidity? I don't keep moulded shells. We shell, we fill, we cap, we get them out of the mould. I've got shells here from a mould over there, and they won't fit back. So that's the same size mould, but it won't fit back in. It will not fit back in because chocolate expands and contracts. Humidity is what will make chocolate expand. So not something I do. I'll paint them and keep the shells, keep the moulds. But the point where I'm ready to shell, once they've retracted, we're filling them. And once that filling's firm enough, we're capping them. And as soon as the cap's firm, they're coming out the mould because I'll repaint the mould and we'll reuse it. So Misty Max, not something I would do. Not something I would do. I wouldn't make shells one day and try and store them for a week. I think you would, I think some would either sink back in. There is a danger, and what the other thing that happens with chocolate is it continues to shrink and shrink and shrink. So if it shrinks too much, when I say they don't fit back in, what happens is they come above the top, but then there's too much of a gap. If we leave them for too long, what happens is they shrink and shrink and shrink. And when you go to cap, you end up with chocolate down the edges, and it looks a bit, doesn't look right. Kind of. Like with that one, all the capping chocolate goes up the edge. We cap like that, and the chocolate can go down that gap, and it looks a bit unsightly. So, it's not the shortcut that you're looking for. That for sure. Another question: Ruby chocolate for shell covering should be managed like milk or dark chocolate? Really been having issues with it. I'm not a big fan of ruby chocolate. Treat it like white chocolate. It's technically a white chocolate, right? Same temperature as white chocolate. What I would say is let me grab a bag, right? Nice to see that Calibut listened to me right? And then put Ziploc, right? It's only taken them forever. There's this graph on the side of the bag, and it's not hugely helpful because this says to use it at 28, 29. Okay, if we paint molds, and then we shell with white chocolate at 29, first problem is it's going to be too thick. So when we tap it out, and that's a 3-drop chocolate, although it's not, it's kind of nearer to 4-drop, isn't it? I think everybody will agree that is nearer to a 4-drop chocolate, whereas the 823 is nearer to a 2-drop chocolate. But using it at 29 is not going to be enough warmth to melt this layer of cocoa butter. So I'm not a huge fan. I think the little graphs on the side of the bag are irrelevant. I think they go back to the days when, before we had silk and before we had Mycryo. I think they're back to the days when we used to table and we were just doing moulded chocolates without colour, in which case, you know, if the mould is empty and it's got no colouring in it, go ahead and shell. It'll be absolutely fine at 29 degrees because we're not doing anything else. But now that we've got colour, we need chocolate at a slightly warmer temperature. What I was saying earlier about earlier on, I said that if your mould is too cold this time of year, to put it on a mat where, if that mould is too cold and we've got coloured chocolate, if that mould is too cold when we pour, one of the things is we're going to get dull. The other thing is that when you tap it out, you'll find lots of chunks of cocoa butter left in there because it never got melted in that shelling process, and that's the bit that causes the difficulty. I use silk and I use all the chocolates at all the same temperature, 32, every single one of them, milk, dark, white, ruby. I don't use ruby. I use all of them at 32 because I'm adding the beta crystals to it. The challenge comes when you're seeding. You've got to warm the chocolate up. 29, I would never shell kind of below 30 and a half, 31. I'd never shell with chocolate below that temperature when I've got colours, because we've got to melt that layer, right? And I think it's really important to know that shelling at 31 with colour is the minimum I go to. Even 30 and a half, I'd be kind of nervous because I think it would go dull and dry and retract too quickly. My caps are concaved and cracked. Many things: too cold a temperature, over-tempered chocolate very often, temperature, chocolate at the wrong temperature. So you want to cap at kind of 32, 33 degrees if you can. When caps are concaved, it's normally because you cap and then put them straight in the fridge. Just leave them at room temperature to cool down a little bit. The other thing is, when you pour the chocolate on, you need to... Here's a thing, this is worth chatting about. Cap on a flat surface, okay? So pour the chocolate on. Get a bowl, I haven't got an empty bowl. Pour the chocolate on, tap on the table, okay? And the chocolate will sink into the voids, okay? If you pour the chocolate on and you do this, the chocolate doesn't sink into all the voids between the filling and that surface layer. So do it on the table. I would assume that everybody's working on a flat table. If you're not, sort the table out, right? But if we want flat caps, we want a flat surface. If you've got a flat table, pour the chocolate on, tap it there, and then scrape it, and you will find that you won't get the concave caps. The reason they go concave is there is space for the chocolate to shrink. If they're filled properly, if you use an overly thick chocolate, and also when the chocolate's wet, if you put it into the fridge, it will just retract and crack too quickly, right? That's an interesting fact, Mo. Very interesting. Vincent there, Vincent Hopkins, pastry chef, very talented chef there. He sent me a really funny reel earlier about Maltesers, which I can't share. Did you say 4% glycerine? Do I have to reduce the cream because I'm adding more fluid? No, that's binding it. No different if you were adding inverted sugar. You're adding kind of a liquid to it. It's going to make the cream runnier, but we're not adding water. It's vegetable glycerine. It's not water based, right? Has anybody managed to get Mycryo lately? Is there a shortage of Mycryo? Shortage of cocoa butter, shortage of chocolate. I don't think there's a shortage of chocolate, is there? I know you said not to freeze caramels and ganduyas, but I have a freezer space and not much fridge space. Evelyn, at this time of year, put them in a box and put them on a shelf, because I'm sure your room is cool enough, right? If your room is below 18 degrees, they'll be absolutely fine on the shelf. Try and keep them out of sunlight, okay? Final question, can I ship your colours to Colombia? I don't know if we've sent to Colombia. Yeah, we did send some to Bogota. I don't think it's on the website. I don't think Colombia's on there at the moment. I know we don't ship to Brazil because there's huge. Brazil and Uruguay, there are huge problems. Like, you need a license to bring food in, and they consider this a food as opposed to ingredients. So we had like endless dialogue between us and customs in Brazil. We have sent stuff to Bogota, so I don't see why not. I need to talk to Mrs. Sosassi about South America. Sent it to Mexico, sent it to Colombia. I'm trying to think where else we sent it. So many countries now. I'd have to have a think. Chocy Chocolate, send me a message and I'll get Mrs. Sosassi to follow that one up. So, can I give tips on velvet effects on bonbons? I did about 15 minutes of it. So, yeah, thank you. Helped me choose an airbrush and a compressor. Happy days. Did you, Michelle? Did you book the airbrush class? Because that'd be the next step. And you, the airbrush class will get you totally in the right direction, right? So many questions. I've got to keep going. Yeah, I wanted to say that Aurora Borealis. We were all sat in the garden going, "What's it called? What's it?" You're not allowed to Google what the lights are called. You have to remember. And I sat there going, "No, no." We were calling it borage. We were calling it foliage. Aurora Borealis. See, I did well at school, right? So, that's a good. Michelle's made a good point there. Keep your fillings acidic. Ruby will go great if alkaline. Exactly. And I know people that make ganaches and are like, where did the ruby chocolate go? It's disappeared. I just don't. I'm not a chocolate snob. But I like all chocolates. Do I have a favourite? I've got ones that I like to work with. Fleur de Cow is my favourite to work with. Like, if I could only ever use one chocolate, Fleur de Cow. I like the fluidity, I like the flavour of it, I like the high percentage of it. Ruby just never ticked my box. I just kind of find it a bit gimmicky. But then I love the gold, which lots of people are like, it's horrible, but I love the gold. I love the calibre gold. I just think it's a really nice snacking. I find it really easy to work with. I like their 811 as well, just as a shelling chocolate. I need to dilute it down with cocoa butter. We'll add kind of 65 grams of cocoa butter per kilo. Just so I've got a 4-drop. I just find it a little bit too sticky. Normally, when you turn it upside down, nothing comes out, and you're like, yeah, that's not a 3-drop, is it? Don't think they're going to listen to a little old channel like me, are they? Right. Do I find adding silk firms up the texture of ganache significant? No, not in the slightest. It makes no difference to the consistency. What it does do is set it so it stays silky smooth as opposed to going grainy. If we chill ganache too quickly, the fat molecules in there, once we've broken that, once we made that emulsion, we've got really, really small balls of fat in there. And they're detectable if we chill a ganache down too quickly. I find that I don't have that. We've got really silky smooth ganache. if I add silk to the ganache at 33 and then pipe it and leave it at room temperature, it sets more evenly. I don't see a change in the amount that we're adding. I don't see a change in the consistency or texture of the ganache in negatively, right? So I've got to remember all the questions tonight because I've got to write this up in a minute. What time have we got? God, gone over, haven't we? God, Alice, right. Fruit caramels for wrapping. I've had difficulty getting the right end consistency. A little too soft for cutting, wrapping. Lana's recipe. Tried to adjust temps, but haven't found the sweet spot. Does Lana not have some advice on that? I think there'll be a temperature that you need to cook it to. I know that, 1 degree difference will make a huge difference to caramels in terms of when it's at cold and it's wrappable. I mean, generally, when they were, if they were a little bit too soft, we would just use a longer sheet and wrap it that way. I would ask Lana, I would message Lana, she's very good at going back. People have bought the courses and classes, I'd go back to her and she might have some better advice on the specific recipe. Different fruits, different waters, different concentrations, different temperatures will give you very different effects, right? So, I need to scroll through. With extreme temperatures in India, what temperature do we use? The brass stamp on chocolate, also compound. If the brass stamp is to do those, there's 2 things you can do. You can freeze them, or you can get these. I've got one in the fridge here because we do use it. With the brass stamps, it's the chocolate cooling spray. Okay, and I don't know what's in there. I think it's nitrogen. And when it's pressurized, it's very, very cold. It's like -60. So we'd spray that on the end of the stamp and use them that way. Alternative, the very expensive way is to have liquid nitrogen or dry ice and sit that in there. But brass stamping, you just need ultra cool. And it helps if you have lots of stamps and you have them all frozen and bring them out, 1 at a time. And you can do 2 or 3 stamps and then change them over, right? Alternatively, freeze, if you've got a small piece of marble or quartz, putting that in the freezer for a couple of days, freeze the stamps and bring the whole thing out and leave the marble table with the stamps on. That will just give you a little bit more time as well. We've done that, so right. Oh, that's nice to hear, Vincent. New Chocy shop. Right, I'm going to get going. I'm going to scroll into the end. If I haven't got all the questions tonight, I tell you what, that's a lot of questions. I try and remember. I'm hoping that Sophia's written them all down. Everybody have a good week. I'm going to try and recover a bit. I've got a lot of hands-on classes. I've still got these to do. We've got all the labels. We've got all the bits. I'm hoping that I don't even know if I'm going to get it done next week because I've got hands-on classes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then a huge order to do on Thursday, Friday, Chocy Chat, so it might be after the weekend before I get those launched. I've got all the products, just need to get it together, along with the website. Yeah, we're kind of behind. We've all been a bit poorly, so we're just like really, really behind at the minute. That's the joys of having your own business. When you're poorly, you've kind of got to stop, right? I don't know. We went to Legoland and we all got ill. What's that all about? Anyway, have a nice week. Be nice to people. Join Chocy Chat. I know that looks empty, but there is plenty. So, I've just got to kind of restock from the other store. So that'll all be back in stock. There's a few colours that are out at the minute, but I'll get those topped up this week. Have a nice week. Think about temperature. Just think about how cold your rooms are. We don't want to be working in really, really cold. Equally, you've got to find that balance, right? You've got to find that balance. If things are retracting too quickly, slow it down, all right? You'll get much more shine and you'll get much better quality, right? Have a good week. I'm going to go and have dinner, watch a movie, drink hot Ribena, and then tell Mrs. So Sassy that I don't feel very well and try and get some sympathy, all right? Have a lovely week, everybody.